There is a $20 bill sitting in a box at the Nova Scotia archives. It is a receipt for a fine. The government of Canada issued it in November 1946, and a woman named Viola Desmond paid it and went home. She didn't give a speech. She didn't hold a press conference. She didn't call a lawyer. She just paid the fine and went home. And for most of the next 7 decades, almost no one outside Nova Scotia knew her name. This is the story of what she did in that theater, and what Canada eventually decided to do about it. Viola Desmond was born in Halifax in 1914, the 6th of 13 children. Her father was James Davis, a barber with a small clientele on Gottingen Street. Her mother, Gwendolyn, ran a dress shop out of the family home. Sewing, alterations, fittings, inventory, everything. 13 children and a business, managed without any of the language we'd use for it today. They were one of the few Black families in a city that had more invisible walls than it liked to admit. Walls that didn't appear in writing, but that everyone who needed to know about them knew about. Viola grew up watching her mother work, managing a household and a business at the same time, quietly and without complaint. It left a mark on how she understood what a woman was capable of. She was sharp, and she was determined, and when she decided she wanted to build a career in beauty, the province of Nova Scotia told her no. Not personally, not in a letter. The beauty schools simply did not accept Black students. That was the policy, and the policy was not up for discussion. So she left. She went to Montreal first, then to New York, then to Atlantic City. She studied cosmetology, skin chemistry, technique, business administration. She studied how successful salon owners ran their operations, their pricing, their training methods, their client relationships. She became genuinely exceptional, not merely competent, exceptional. And when she came back to Halifax in the late 1930s, she did not come back looking for employment. She came back to build something. Vi's Studio of Beauty Culture, on Gottingen Street in the north end of Halifax. Her own salon, her own name above the door. And then she did something almost nobody in her position did. She opened a school, the Desmond School of Beauty Culture, designed specifically to train Black women from across the Maritime provinces who had been turned away from every other cosmetology program, exactly as she had been. Students came from Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island. She trained them, certified them, sent them out to open their own salons. She was 26 years old when she opened it. Over the following years, the business expanded. She developed a cosmetics line, Sepia Beauty Products, formulated for and marketed to Black women who had been ignored by every mainstream brand on the market. She was building a small empire, held together by precision and discipline and a clear sense of purpose. She had a husband, Jack Desmond, also a barber. She had a reputation that extended well beyond Halifax. In November 1946, she was 32 years old and she had a business trip to make. Sydney, Nova Scotia, about 300 kilometers east along the coast. She loaded her car and started the drive. The car broke down in New Glasgow. The engine. A garage would look at it, but not until the next day. She had hours to fill in a town she had never spent time in. Someone mentioned there was a theater nearby, the Roseland Theater. She walked over, bought a ticket, a main floor ticket, walked in, and chose a seat on the main floor. A few minutes later, an usher appeared and told her she was in the wrong section. The The main floor was for white patrons only. She would need to move upstairs, to the balcony. Viola Desmond looked at him and said no. She said later she hadn't known. She had purchased a main floor ticket and she was sitting on the main floor. She told the usher she would pay the price difference if there was one. There was no difference. A balcony ticket cost 1 cent less. She stayed in her seat. The manager called the police. 2 officers arrived. They physically removed her. She would say later she was dragged, that her hip was injured, that neither party was gentle. She was taken to the New Glasgow jail and spent the night there. The next morning, she was charged. Not under a racial segregation statute. Nova Scotia did not have one on the books in those exact terms. The charge was tax evasion. A balcony ticket cost 1 cent less than a main floor ticket, and therefore carried 1 cent less in provincial entertainment tax. By sitting on the main floor with a main floor ticket, the province argued, Viola Desmond had deprived the government of that 1 cent in tax revenue. The fine was $20, plus $6 in court costs. She paid it, and she went home. She talked to her husband when she got back to Halifax. Jack was cautious by temperament. He worried about what a prolonged legal fight would cost them, what it might do to the business, what doors it might close. The Nova Scotia Association for the Advancement of Colored People read the situation differently. They had been tracking the province's informal racial segregation for years, in theaters, in restaurants, in waiting rooms, in every soft corner of public life where the rules were never written down, but were understood by everyone who needed to follow them. And they saw immediately what had happened to Viola and what it represented. They asked her to let them take the case forward. She agreed. An appeal was filed, argued, and denied. The court found no racial discrimination in the legal sense of the term. The argument that the tax charge was a pretext, a mechanism for enforcing segregation through a technical violation, was heard and set aside. The conviction stood. Viola Desmond had a criminal record. For sitting in a seat she had paid for failing to pay 1 cent in tax. She went back to her work. She kept running the salon, the school, the cosmetics line. She and Jack separated in the early 1950s. She moved to Montreal to study business administration. She had not stopped making plans. She died in New York City in 1965. She was 48 years old. The conviction was still on her record. She never saw what came next. Her sister Wanda Robson had been a girl during the Roseland incident, young enough to know something serious had happened without fully understanding what it meant. As she grew older, she understood more. She talked about Viola wherever she could. She told the story to neighbors, to students, to community groups. In her 60s, she enrolled at Cape Breton University and wrote her thesis on her sister's life. She was not going to let Viola become a footnote. In 2010, the Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia issued Viola Desmond a free pardon, the first posthumous exoneration of a racialized person in Canadian history, 64 years after the conviction. The government also issued a formal apology to everyone subjected to the same system she had pushed back against. And then Canada decided it wasn't finished. In 2016, the Bank of Canada announced a competition to place a historic Canadian woman on the $10 bill. Thousands of nominations came in. A shortlist was assembled. The decision was announced in 2018. Viola Desmond. 72 years after she was removed from a theater seat and charged with failing to pay 1 cent in tax, her portrait was placed on the front of Canada's $10 bill. The woman the province had convicted of tax evasion became the face of 10 Canadian dollars. Wanda Robson was at the unveiling ceremony. She was in her 80s. She had spent 50 years telling this story to anyone who would listen. She held the new bill in her hands and didn't say very much. There are photographs of that moment. Wanda's hands, the bill, her sister's face looking out from the center of it, composed and direct, the way she had been in that theater seat all those years before. The fine receipt is still in the archives. $20 and $6 in costs, paid in November 1946 by a woman who just wanted to watch a film. She paid the fine, she went home, and 72 years later, Canada put her face on the money. If you've been watching this channel for a while, you know why we tell stories like this one. Not because they have clean endings. Viola died before any recognition came. But because the record of what someone did does not disappear just because no one is paying attention. Wanda Robson knew that. She spent 50 years making sure of it. Quiet moments have long echoes. What Viola did in that seat was not a prepared act of defiance. She just refused to accept that an unjust rule applied to her. A simple, inconvenient no. And that no took 72 years to fully answer. Next Tuesday, we're going to tell you about a man who hid something in his sock on one of the most dangerous days of his life. He was a photographer in South Africa. What he captured that day changed the world, and then it was taken from him. We'll see you then.